迎各位老师和同学来到我们教育部委托我们国立台湾师范大学办理的99到100年度高中英文教师赴海外研习计划及回国经验分享会。今天是我们101年3月25号在台南的场次，我们特别接到国立台南第2中学的学艺能馆演艺厅举办我们的活动。那我们这个研习分享会呢，总共举办了4场。前面的3场都是在22、23、24号，分别在我们的国立台湾师范大学、花莲女子高级中学，还有台中女中，我们都分别举办了各一场研讨会。今天是我们最后一个场次，那我们接下来将我们的场子交给我们的今天的会场的主持人，我们的陈秋兰教授，谢谢。
非常欢迎大家哈。那我想我就很简短说明一下我们这个计划。这个是去年夏天呢，有21位老师到那个 Fraser University 去做了5个礼拜的进修哈。那我们今年也特别从Fraser University 请了Helen Erickson 来，那Helen 在那边也上了课，然后再回来跟我们做分享。然后这些老师们呢，就是去的时候呢，就有一个 mission， 就是回来之后呢，一定要分享，要把他在那边所学的东西呢，在课堂上去实验之后呢，回来跟我们分享一些结果。那我们就希望说，将来我们会有更多的老师去，我们可以送更多的老师去。那宗教师第3科科长在这里哈，他 promise 说这个活动会继续下去，我们等一下请他讲几句话。然后重点就是说，我们希望这5个礼拜的时间呢，你所学的东西呢，会 last for the rest of your life， 然后会 benefit 你的学生跟你的 colleague 啊。那今天就是他们的一个分享，那你可以看到他们其实学了很多，然后有很那个 passion 要跟人家分享，然后你可以知道说他上了这个课之后呢，回来呢这一学期是很 energetic 在做一些活动的，那我们很高兴看到这样的成果哈。那今天当然也非常谢谢我们的助理，就帮我们做了很多的安排。我自己其实是2天前才从国外回来，所以前几场都没有参加这样哈。那也非常谢谢那个2中的借我们场地哈，谢谢陈老师帮我们安排，那更谢谢校长很 generously 把这个场地借给我们哈。那我大概就先讲到这里哈。那我们先请那个我们的长官科长给我们讲几句话。
谢谢我们台湾师大英语系的陈秋兰老师哈。我们这个活动之所以能够那么顺利哈，也多亏我们陈秋兰老师哈。在应该是去年还是前年的时候，我们有一次机会，我特别拜访我们陈秋兰老师哈，希望台湾师大能够帮我们办这样一个活动哈，因为这个活动其实在92年的时候，其实已经有一些老师有陆陆续续出去，那之前有去参加那个有分国小组、国中组跟高中组哈，那也陆续出去有一些美国的一些，比如说像美国的一些大学，还有澳洲哈，有些学校也是类似这样的活动。那后来很可惜，就是中间有一段过程有断掉了。然后最近这几年，部里面也接获到很多出去的老师回来跟部里面做经验分享，是一直蛮强调说这种活动哈，不仅是老师受惠哈，那也是学生受惠。所以我特别跟我们部里面一些长官沟通，就是希望说这样的活动能够持续的办理，那也希望说更多的老师来受惠。然后希望这些老师能以后会变成我们的种子，然后未来可以开发结果哈。所以也拜托陈秋兰老师特别帮忙，陈秋兰老师义不容辞就帮我们接下来这个工作。那很感谢我们师大英语系的陈秋兰老师，还有吴美珍老师哈，那几个教授都很热心，也很帮忙哈。所以我们去年顺利出来了25位的那个高中英文教师哈，参加我们这样一个活动。那这次分北中南东做一些经验的分享哈。那我有去参加就是我们北区的分享。那北区给我的感觉很谢谢我们Helen 老师哈，真的在那个我觉得那个在分享那个过程当中，我很高兴看到就是老师的互动哈，就是 因为我们这次可能就是邀请的对象除了高中英文老师之外，我们也欢迎国中的英文老师，甚至是师资生，或者是已经毕业了这些储备老师，其实也可以来参加我们这样的分享的活动。那主要是希望说，透过这样一个会议，大家不仅能够在国外那段期间所获得的一些收获，然后在我们国内也可以就是经过一个学期的一个action plan 能够去透过这样子的活动，能够在您的教学上面可以对学生有所帮助，也对老师在教学上面有所收获。那希望这样的活动可以持续在推广。那顺便我在这边做一个广告就是刚刚陈秋兰老师有特别提到，就是说我们这个活动，我们未来在明年就是我们把对象扩及到高职跟国中的老师那我们希望说这样的活动可以持续的办理下去。那部里面目前这样的方向是应该是不会有太大的变化，所以我们也很欢迎，就是说有兴趣的老师可以看一下我们这几次的那个一个经验分享，然后也留意一下我们相关的一些活动。那未来我们希望说可能也要麻烦我们台湾师大这边，可能未来也会分析一下，看看我们未来在办理上面还有没有哪些地方还可以再更精进的。那今天也特别感谢我们台南2中的王校长特别拨冗参加，然后也提供我们这样一个很好的场地，然后也很高兴台南2中的老师这样帮忙做成我们今天这样一个场地，也非常感谢。那我在这边就是一方面就是希望说我们各位参与的老师未来也能够就是对我们这样一个活动也给予支持，因为据我的了解，好像高职的老师参与的活动参与这样子的情况可能比较没有那么热络啦那未来我们是希望说，其实高中英文老师能够有这样一个机会，我觉得是很难得的。因为我们刚才在车上就在跟陈秋兰老师在做一些经验分享，其实像很多其他科的老师这样一个就是海外语言研习的机会其实是不太多。那最近这几年，其实像韩国在那个各地好像都一直在做一些很大量的经费在投资上面。其实这种现象现在走向国际化，其实很多国家也在做竞争。因为之前我很高兴有一些机会去参加国际奥林匹亚，有跟一些学生带学生去参加比赛。那我们可以发现，就是很多的欧美的国家那甚至是有一些，比如说像新加坡，还有一些亚洲国家，比如说像泰国，其实这些国家在那个国际化的这部分，其实是有在努力那这个部分可能就是说，我们未来国家在发展方向上面，也许可以更加的着力。那我在这边也预祝我们这个分享会顺利成功。谢谢。
我们请王校长给我们讲几句话
计划主持人台师大陈教授，还有我们教育部陈科长，以及我们今天的讲师 Helen 教授各位英文科的教育伙伴，以下各位同仁，大家好。非常的突兀，也非常的高兴能够有这个机会来参与今天的这个研习活动。那么各位能够在假日拨冗来参加这样的一个研习活动，来到我们2中，这是我们2中的光荣。我们也感到今天能够来的同仁，绝对是优质的一个老师，他愿意牺牲他的假期休息，来到这样的一个会场。那么各位的敬业跟热忱，我们非常的尊敬。所以首先要代表我们台2中的所有师生跟所有与会的教师们致上最高的敬意跟欢迎之意。那么今天的这个研习呢，我看了一下研习手册，我相信 这是一个非常好的计划。海外去研习学习回来以后，把他的心得跟他的体验，透过心得分享的方式来传播给其他没有去的这个老师。我相信啊，这一些内容都是他们的这个智慧的结晶，而且也是句句都是会是金玉良言。所以我们相信今天的研习虽然要到下午4点钟左右哈，不过一定可以让各位收获满行囊的。我相信绝对不虚今天的此行，也不会浪费你牺牲假期的这样的一个代价哈。那我想因为时间也很多，我也很突兀的站在这里哈，所以我特别祝我们所有与会的这个老师们能够因为这样的学习能够让你的这个未来的教学的技术跟你的教学的方式啊能够更好会更愉快，也祝我们今天的所有的大会的活动顺利圆满。谢谢大家，谢谢。
好，我们非常谢谢我们校长哈，那更要特别谢谢就是那个中教司的科长陈英科长哈，那就是我们都是一大早从台北赶过来，然后那个科长说他等一下还要赶回去这样，那我想我们就不耽误大家时间哈，那可不可以请2位就坐，我们开始我们的演讲。那我现在就要把麦克风给我们今天第一场的讲者哈，Helen Erickson， 那他的那个演讲的资料就是大纲在第5页哈 ，PowerPoint 在第5页，那我想我就不特别介绍他就是在 Fraser University， 然后在这5个礼拜当中呢，就是跟着我们的学员就是上了一些课这样哈，那我们就是特别邀请他回来跟我们做分享。那就是我们就是有这样的一个模式，就是去上课之后呢，我们邀请其中1位讲者上课老师回来跟大家分享，一方面也看看就是叙旧，跟这些当初在那里的老师们做叙旧，然后也了解一下经过1学期之后呢，他们沉淀然后发挥出来的一些教学上的精华哈。那好，我现在就把麦克风交给Helen。
It's Sunday, and I'm so impressed that you are here at school. Thank you very much. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the Ministry of Education for inviting me here on behalf of Simon Fraser University and the Burnaby School District. I would also like to say a huge thank you to NTNU, to Professor Sholan, and to Professor Angela Miechen, and to Caroline for their amazing hospitality while I've been here in Taiwan. I've had a wonderful opportunity to see different parts of your wonderful country or wonderful island, and to enjoy your school. I'd like to say thank you to the president of the Tainan Secondary School for hosting us today. A huge thank you to the teachers who are going to be presenting today. Their presentations so far have been inspiring, exciting. It is very interesting for me to come to Taiwan and hear the conversations that are taking place in your schools and your classrooms. And finally, I would like to say thank you very much to you for being here, because the teachers have gone on a journey, and you are now becoming a part of their journey as they share their stories and experiences with you. For today, I'm going to be adding a few things to the conversation. I'm going to be introducing some of the big ideas that the teachers came to SFU and learned about. Some of these big ideas you will see that they've taken and they've implemented in their classroom. So I will try to give you a little bit of background information about some of the practices that they learned about during their summer visits. Before I ever get started in my classroom, one of the things I always do is introduce the goals for the activity. So the students know what they're doing, why they're here, and what will be the objective for approximately the next hour. So our objectives for today's presentation is number 1, that I hope you will activate your own personal mental model for effective teaching and learning. I'm sure that all of us have our beliefs and our opinions about what effective teaching and learning looks like. I hope that I can introduce some things today that you can add to what you already know about teaching and learning. For processing, I hope that, as I said, I will be able to add some new information. And what I'm going to ask you to do today is I'm going to ask you to compare some of the effective teaching practices that I'm going to introduce, and for you to determine what are some of the common characteristics of these effective teaching practices. I hope that by the end of the presentation, you will be able to make a decision about which of these teaching practices you think will be the most effective in your own classroom with your own students. And finally, as you are leaving today, I hope that you will take with you one idea, maybe more, that you can use in your classroom. One thing that you think, yes, I can do that too, and I will try it in my classroom. During today's presentation, if you would like, if there is anything that I say that is confusing or interesting that you would like to know more about, please feel free to tweet me. My Twitter handle is @BeyondBCBorders. You can use the hashtag #NTNU2012. If you use that hashtag, it's a very easy way for me to find the tweet that you have sent. Please feel free also to go and search Twitter under that hashtag #NTNU2012, as I will be posting responses to the questions that individuals ask me, as well as additional resources. If you would prefer not to use Twitter, there's another website you can go to, walwisher.com/wall/no school is an island. On this website, you can post any of your questions or concerns, and as well, I will be posting some more information to go with today's presentation. And take a moment and get you just to say hi to the person beside you. I'm going to be doing this quite a bit during today's presentation, and now's just a good time to figure out who is this person who is sitting beside you, behind you, around you. So if you could just take a moment to just turn around and say, hi, how are you, good morning, it's Sunday. I can't believe we're all here together. Okay, so now you know this person who is sitting beside you, around you, behind you. What I'd like you to do is take a moment to think about what you already know about effective teaching and learning. What I'd like you to do is talk to your partner about a memorable or powerful learning experience that you have had. I'm going to put some questions up on the PowerPoint to help guide your discussion. We're going to have about 2 minutes. I'd like each person to have an opportunity to talk. What do you think is necessary for powerful learning, for memorable learning experiences? Here's some questions that can help you. With your partner, you might think about a moment in your life where you learned something very well and you enjoyed learning it. You might describe a powerful or memorable learning experience. You might give us your opinion. What do you think effective teaching and learning looks like, feels like, and sounds like? And perhaps describe the conditions that you feel are necessary for an individual to really learn something. Please take 2 minutes. Okay, in 30 seconds to finish your conversation. Okay, if you could say thank you to your partner for sharing their personal or memorable learning experience, or say thank you to your partner for sharing their opinions or beliefs. Did you notice that when I first asked you to turn and talk to your partner, a few people hesitated? And they thought, really? I'm allowed to go ahead? I'm allowed to talk to the partner beside me? I'm actually supposed to do that? When you're teaching, when you use the strategy that we just used called turn and talk, it's a good way to get your students to connect with their background knowledge, to start thinking about the things that they're going to be learning throughout the lesson. One thing that you want to keep in mind as a teacher is be very patient. If you say, please turn and talk, and then you say, oh, no one is turning and talking, no one is saying anything, and then if you start talking, what you are teaching your students, if they just wait longer than you, they won't have to do any work. Because eventually, you're just going to jump in and talk for them. So what you want to do is in your head, just quietly keep counting to 10. And keep counting until they actually start talking. And then what they'll realize is that when they do the turn and talk activity, they are expected to participate. It's a good way to move them from passive learners to active learners. When you're using this strategy, a good idea, let the volume in the room go up, wait for it to go down. When it goes down, it's probably because they're like, oh yeah, I answered the question, I'm finished. Don't stop them. Wait again. The volume will go up again because they're probably going to say, whoa, she's not talking or he's not talking. Okay, let's keep talking. Isn't that what we want them to do? Practice your language. Okay, so they keep talking. Again, the volume's going to go down because they're going to think, okay, we must be done by now. Don't interrupt them. The third time the volume goes up, that's when you catch them. Because by the time the volume goes up for the third time, they've had time to answer the question very easily. Give the fast, give the simple answers. Then they've had time to maybe think some more, add some information. They've had time to actually get into a conversation. By the time they get to that third level where the volume is rising in the room, that is when you're going to catch them thinking about the really big ideas. And you catch them then and say, tell me what you're talking about right now. I want to know what you were talking about right now, not 3 minutes ago. What kind of things were you talking about at the end there? And that's when you're going to get some really powerful ideas that can lead you into longer, more interesting classroom discussions. So I'm wondering, how many people thought about a fantastic worksheet they did in school? It was the most impressive worksheet that they ever did. Did anybody think about their favorite textbook? I wonder if your most powerful or memorable learning experience took place in the classroom, or if they maybe took place outside the classroom. As we were going through today's presentation, we're going to be looking at how can we really create these memorable, interesting learning experiences in our classroom as often as possible. And we're going to look at some of those effective teaching practices. Now, my most memorable learning experience took place about 6 years ago. I was teaching at a brand new school. It had just opened. It was in a very low socioeconomic area in Vancouver, so not many teachers wanted to teach there. And most of the teachers in the school had less than 5 years teaching experience. But there was one teacher at our school who had been teaching for a long time. He was actually getting close to retirement. And we all looked up to him as a role model. He gave us a lot of advice. He was a great leader in the school. And at his retirement party, he looked at us and said, "Good luck. I hope you figure it out." Because he said, as he was leaving his career, he actually knew less about teaching than he felt that he did when he began his career. Because our classrooms are changing, our students are changing. We all know that technology is changing. We know that we are moving away we're moving into an information age and moving into a knowledge-based economy. So what is teaching going to look like when we're trying to prepare our students for jobs that don't even exist yet. So at first I was very afraid. Oh my goodness, here's a very experienced teacher. If he doesn't know how to teach, how am I going to learn how to teach? And it made me really, really look at my practice and really start asking a lot of questions about teaching. And what I've come to realize is that even if education is changing, even if our schools are changing, our students are changing, the world is changing, there are some things about education that have stayed the same. They have stood the test of time. These building blocks of education, they work. And if we can really focus as teachers on doing the effective things, the high-quality teaching, then I think we can survive our careers, and hopefully, as we retire, we can walk away from our careers feeling very successful and satisfied. So today, we're going to talk about some of the most effective teaching practices. We've done this same workshop with teachers throughout British Columbia and asked them to determine what they feel the 10 most effective teaching practices are. In the interest of today, I'm not going to go over all 10. I'm going to focus on 4. The reason I'm going to focus on these 4 teaching practices is because the teachers you are going to hear from today have taken these teaching practices and implemented them in their classroom, so I will provide a little bit of context for the work that they are doing. The reason we feel that these are effective teaching practices is because these are the teaching practices that research and contemporary theory has demonstrated that we cannot afford to ignore. They work for all students, all grade levels, all content areas. If we can focus on these, it will work. So here we go. How do you determine what effective teaching practice is? We need some criteria to make this decision. So here's the criteria that we have used. If a teaching practice is effective, it must improve the learning for all students. It must also increase students' responsibility for their own learning. We need independent thinkers for this new world. It also must have opportunities, multiple opportunities for students to enter into the learning experiences, multiple ways for students to demonstrate their knowledge, as well as multiple ways for them to process their knowledge. It needs to focus on deep learning. Perhaps you've had a situation in your classroom where your students say to you, I can't do that. The teacher last year didn't teach me. Come on, I know your teacher. I know your teacher taught you. It's just possibly that they haven't remembered what they've already learned. These teaching practices must also generate frequent opportunities for student collaboration. Research has shown us to survive in today's modern workplace, individuals will need to know how to work as a team. And finally, this will need to be research-based teaching practices. So this is the criteria we have used to select effective teaching practices. I'd like you again quickly to turn to the person beside you, behind you, around you, and you decide. Is this criteria acceptable? Is there something missing from this list of criteria? Is there something that can be removed? Do you think that this criteria will be usable to judge effective teaching practices? Why? Or why not? Please turn and talk to your partner. And 30 seconds to finish your conversation. if you could please say thank you to your partner for sharing their thoughts and ideas. And we're just going to come back together to discuss as a full group. Okay. Did you notice the buzz in the room? Did you hear people talking around you? One of the things that we want to do as teachers is to increase the buzz that is happening in the classroom. If you as a teacher are doing all the talking, there's a good chance you are doing the majority of the learning. It's not about how much you are learning every day. It is hopefully how much the students are learning every day. Okay. Remember, your job during this presentation is to make a decision. Which of the teaching practices that we talk about today do you think should get the #1 spot? Which one do you feel will be the most effective teaching practice for you in your classroom? Which one do you think will be the most usable? Maybe you will use some of this criteria to help make that decision. I'm going to be introducing two models or two effective teaching practices to begin with. The first one is backwards by design, and the second one is universal design. So these are two teaching practices about designing learning experiences. Backwards by design is started with the idea that if we know where we are going, it is easier to get there. Many of us have a situation in our classrooms, I think, where you feel overwhelmed. I have too much content to teach. I have so much to teach before the exams. I don't have enough time to teach everything that I am teaching. Backwards by Design asks teachers to focus on the big ideas. Focus on what is really important for your students to know and to be able to do, and really focus on teaching those concepts and ideas. Don't get lost in all the small details. Keep the big picture in mind. Keep your goal really clear for you and your students to see. So we begin backwards by design by identifying the desired results. What do we want our students to be able to do? We determine acceptable evidence. How will I know what they are able to do? Notice, I did not start with my lesson plan. I don't start thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow. I start thinking about what I'm going to do in 2 weeks. I start thinking about what my desired result is. Then I start thinking about my assessment. And then I think about what my lesson plans are going to be. Because my lesson plans should be designed to get me to the big goal. It should not be designed just to get me through the next hour. This year we have the Summer Olympics coming up in London in 2012. And just as the athletes are preparing for their performances this summer, we want to help our students prepare for their performances. The athletes going to the Olympics this summer have a very clear picture about what their performance needs to look like. They know what the end goal is. They also know exactly how their performance is going to be judged and evaluated. It is very clear to them. And their coaches are working very hard to support their development and every day get them one step closer to their final goal. As teachers, we want to create these same types of experiences for our students by asking ourselves the following questions. What do my students need to know, and what do they need to be able to do? They're going to have content objectives. They're going to have language objectives. How will I know what my students are able to know or what they're able to do? Again, think about your assessment before you go to your lesson plan. Then you start thinking, okay, well, what learning activities will promote student learning, the big ideas and the processes? As you watch the teachers' presentations today, you will notice that several of them are using this model. They have an idea about what they would like their students to be able to know, be able to do. They've thought about their assessment, and then they have carefully selected interactive activities and strategies to help their students reach those goals. That is backwards by design. Before I go to universal design, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to write down 3 words that will help you remember backwards design. What are 3 key words that you could keep in your mind to help you remember what backwards design is? You have 30 seconds. you have 30 seconds to compare with your partner. What did your partner write down as 3 keywords? What did the person behind you write as 3 keywords? 30 seconds, ask somebody else what they wrote. Okay, this is a quick strategy you can use in your classroom. About every 5 minutes that you are talking, you want to give your students at least 30 seconds to a minute to process what you have said. I don't want to go on to universal to design until you have some understanding of what backwards design is and something to compare. Because remember, the objective today is that you're going to compare these teaching practices. See which one they have in common and see which one will be most effective. So as I move forward to universal design, I'd like you to keep in mind, okay, well, what's backwards by design? How does it compare to universal design? What's the difference? What's the similarity between these two practices? Universal design actually came from a movement in architecture. So it was not originally created by educational professionals. It was created by architects who realized that if, while they were designing structures, if they thought about all the needs of individuals who would need to access that building, that structure, that they could actually create structures that have the needs for the individuals actually built into the overall construction. As an end result, they were now creating structures that increased the usability for every individual who needed to access that building. While I've been traveling in Taiwan, I've had a nice little red, well actually a fairly big red suitcase that I've been pulling around everywhere, and I can definitely say I am thankful to all of the city engineers who plan to use ramps to the sidewalks, because picking up my suitcase every time is getting a little bit tiring. I'm very thankful for all the ramps that are around, so I'm not carrying up staircases. I'm very thankful for all the elevators. These are supports that were put into place for individuals who perhaps were in wheelchairs, had walkers, had canes, perhaps had difficulty stepping up steps. This support that was designed for those individuals have really helped me as an individual. By putting supports in place in our lessons, we are actually supporting all of our learners at the same time. Part of my job in Burnaby is to work with different classroom teachers, science teachers, math teachers, PE teachers, and to work with them to help improve the access to content for second language students. We have many students in Canada who are learning English as a second, third, fourth, perhaps fifth language, but they are still having to take the same math classes, the same science classes, the same PE classes. And the teachers, they come and ask me and say, how can I help them? What can I do to help them understand? And I say, do for them what you would do for any of your students. Because when you support them and help them, you are supporting and helping everybody in the room. Universal design is not about making things easier and less demanding on the students. We don't want to create experiences that have very little cognitive demand and very little context. We don't want to dumb down our curriculum. When we're thinking about universal design, we actually want to create highly cognitively demanding experiences, things that get every single person in the room thinking, but it is embedded in context, which means there is support there to help them to be successful in those activities. Again, it's not about making it easier, it's about making it more accessible. And I'm going to give you a quick example. Okay, I'd like you to take a look at this picture, and I would like you very quickly to turn and talk to the individual beside you. Please tell them what you noticed about this picture. What do you see? Okay, put your hand up if you can answer yes to this question. Did you notice that one of the flowers is different? Did you notice that one of them is a different color? Okay. In my English 10 class, the students need to complete a unit on peer pressure and on bullying. And there's many stories they have to read, and poems they have to read, and articles that they have to read. But I know for some of my students, if I put the textbook in their hand the first day of this unit, I will lose about 25, if not 45% of my students. Because the minute I put that text in their hand, it is not accessible to them, so they're already going to check out. So what I do is I start with this, because everybody can see that the flower is different, that one flower is a different color. So then I'm going to push their thinking a little bit more. Have you ever had an experience in your life where you stood out? Did you ever feel like you were a little bit different than everybody around you? Could you turn and talk to your partner? What did it feel like when you were a little bit different than everyone around you? Okay. Did you notice that almost everybody in the group can talk? Almost everybody here has something to say. Again, I want to create learning experiences that have supports in place for all learners to be learning and thinking at the same time. One of the things that I have done is I've taken away the pressure of having to talk in front of the entire class by saying, just talk to the person beside you, giving them a little bit of support. I could also say, if it is difficult to talk about this in English, can you talk about it first in Chinese? Then what I could say is I could say, what were some of the things you wanted to say in English, but were difficult for us to say? And as a class, we could brainstorm some vocabulary. Or as a teacher, I could say, maybe you could use some of these words to help talk about your experiences. A very quick way just to scaffold them, build them up a little bit, make them feel a little bit more confident. I start with what they're already good at. Start with their life experience, give them some opportunities to use their first language, and then I push them a little bit harder. Okay, let's try to talk a little bit more in English now. Okay, so now I'm going to push you a little bit further. In real life, are there times where individuals have stood out? Are there times where people have been judged because they were different than everybody else? How do we, as a society, how do we as individuals treat people who are different than us? Please turn and talk to your partner. How do we treat people in our society who look different than the rest? Okay, so again, do you notice the buzz in the room? Do you notice that even when I start talking, people want to keep talking to the person beside them, behind them, around them. They don't want me to interrupt. Isn't that what we want our students to do? We want them to be engaged, to be active, to be interested in the topic. If I had given you a textbook and said, okay guys, we're going to read about peer pressure and bullying, oh gosh, again, well, we've talked about this so much. But maybe with doing an activity like this, I've already generated some interest. I've also have created a little bit of support. We've talked about some vocabulary that's interesting. We've talked about some of our personal experiences. We've talked about things that we've already learned. So instead of my students feeling like they are starting from zero, they have nothing to bring to the learning experience, now they might be feeling, oh, I already know so much about this topic. I think it will actually be easier for me to read this story, read this poem, read this article. They also might have a reason to read the article now. because we can talk about, well, what did we decide as a class about how individuals are treated when they stand out? Let's see what other people say about that, and let's compare. So those are some examples of how I can build some support into my classroom to create learning experience where all individuals can participate at the same time. As well as for universal design, some things we can ask ourselves as teachers. Have I come up with some different ways for students to activate their background knowledge? Have I used pictures to help them talk about it? Have I given them opportunities to discuss with each other? Perhaps have I found some examples from TV shows that I could show them, some clips from YouTube, to help just generate their background knowledge before I give them something that is very cognitively demanding. Some of the teachers today are going to talk about how they have used universal design in their classroom by using different ways for the students to acquire knowledge. They're going to be talking today about things like using literature circles. They're going to be talking about using strategies such as graphic organizers and milling to music. So they will talk about different ways that they have provided for their students to acquire knowledge, process knowledge, and they are also going to talk about today some ways that they gave their students opportunities to express their understanding. They did presentations, they did projects. They allowed students some creativity and freedom to show their knowledge. They're also going to talk about today how they created multiple opportunities for their students to engage in the learning process. What I think you'll notice in today's presentations is that the teachers have designed learning experiences that move away from the one-size-fits-all. We're all doing the same thing at the exact same time, in the exact same way. Too bad for you if you can't do it. You'll notice that the teachers are really creating open lesson plans that provide their students some creativity and some flexibility. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move ahead and we're going to do a quick talking activity. What I'd like you to do is turn and talk to the partner beside you. And again, if you could decide, do you think that backwards by design or universal design for learning will work in your classroom? Are there some ways that you're already using it? Are there some ways that you could be using it? So take a moment, turn and talk to your partner. Do you think you could use backwards by design? Do you believe that you could use universal design? So again, take a look at the criteria. Do you feel that universal design, backwards by design, actually fits this criteria? Okay. So now we've talked about two effective teaching practices, backwards by design and universal design for learning. I'm going to now introduce two more. So we're going to move on now to talk about differentiated instruction. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you to do a very quick test. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to find a page in your program book where you can write down the name of 10 students in your class. Perhaps on one of the yellow pages that is in your program book. If you could turn to one of those blank pages and write down the name of 10 students you are currently teaching. really quick note about universal design for learning and creating support for individuals. After you give your instruction, give the students opportunity to repeat those instructions to each other. Because maybe if you're a teacher like me, when I get excited, I talk a little bit too quickly, and my students don't know what I'm talking about. So I always give them about 1 minute, 30 seconds. If they need to, they can ask the person beside you, what did she just say? 10 names of 10 students you are currently teaching. Besides these 10 names, I would like you to write down 3 things about each of these students. Something they're interested in, something that they prefer, what are their preferences, and what are their strengths and weaknesses. I would like you to write down 3 things you know about each of these 10 students. And then I would like you to write down 7 more things you know about them. And I see something, I remember doing this at a workshop, and the presenter, exactly same thing, write down 10 students' names. Okay, no problem. I teach like 70 students a semester. Think I can think of 10, no problem. We might think of those 10 students, we're like, yeah, they're so good. But those 10 students are like, oh yeah, I know that kid's name, that's for sure. Then she said, write down 3 things about them. Okay, I can do that. Then she said, okay, write down 7 more. Oh, no. This is what we want to do as teachers to be effective. The more you know about the individuals who are in your room, the better you can respond to them as a teacher. Differentiated instruction has also been called responsive teaching, because teachers who use differentiated instruction actually modify and change and adapt their instruction as their students, as they get to know their students. Teachers who use differentiated instruction are like master chess players. They look at their room and they see the individual pieces, but they see the strengths and limitations of those pieces. And they start thinking how they can move those pieces together to create the most effective learning experiences. The more we know about our students, the more we are able to respond and change our instruction to meet their needs. For differentiated instruction, it's quite a big model, but it does incorporate ideas of backwards by design and universal design. So the 2 elements of differentiated instruction I'm going to focus on next are building a learning community and the knowledge of students. Here are some activities you can use in your class to help you be able to write down the names of all your students and write down at least 3 things about them. The first activity is a fairly easy one for you as a teacher. Before the students come into class, you get a whole bunch of different pieces of paper. On these pieces of paper, you write down some talents that individuals might have. Can you sing? Can you dance? Are you an athlete? Can you play a musical instrument? Have you ever had to be a leader in your class or in a group? Think of all the things that you can ask them about their talents and ask them to autograph the posters that describe their talents. Also leave some blank posters out so that they can write down their unique talents. For example, one of my students wrote, I can create manga comic books. I didn't know that about him until we did this activity. What I'm doing here as a teacher is I'm trying to gain more knowledge about what their talents are so I can use them to my advantage when I start choosing what I am going to do for my learning activities. Multiple intelligence. You might hear some of the teachers talking about this today. We spent a lot of time talking about multiple intelligence at SFU this summer. We want to encourage our students to understand that you can be intelligent in different ways. If you would like, you can find lots of surveys online that you can use to find out. I put this poster up in my classroom to remind my students that we are all here to work together, but we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and we all want to work on building on those every day. Here's a quick activity you could also do in your classroom on Monday. It's called Guess Who, and the strategy is called Instant Bulletin Board. What you do as your students come in, you give them small cards. On the cards you say, please write down one thing that we don't know about you yet. Often what you'll find is that they're going to write a lot more than one thing. Just tell them, please write down something that everybody can know about you. Because we're going to find out who this person is, so just be careful what you write on that card. Then you collect the cards, mix them up, randomly give them to the students, and ask them to go and find the student in the room who can be described by this card. It's a great opportunity just to get them up, moving around, using English. It's a great opportunity for them to get to know each other a little bit better, and for you as a teacher to get to know them a little bit better as well. This year I discovered that one of my students from France, not only is she an ice dancer, she rides a motorcycle in France, and she's also a surfer. Would have never, ever guessed. Okay, we're going to do a quick strategy. For this one, I'm going to need you to be able to stand up and sit down. So if you have something on your lap, you might just move it to the chair beside you. Just get yourself ready. We're going to do a little bit of moving around. Okay, if you can answer yes to this question, I'm going to get you to stand up. I can speak English, and I have a strong interest in teaching. If you can answer yes, stand up. A little bit of peer pressure here today. Okay, I use the internet to help research teaching and learning materials. If you can answer yes, stay standing or stand up. I am going to get married soon. Can we give her a round of applause? Congratulations! Can you tell us quickly, when are you getting married? This year. This summer? After summer. Well, congratulations. Okay, here we go. Next one. Please stand up if you can answer yes to this question. I have a great motivation to learn useful and different knowledge. A little bit more peer pressure. Okay. I read articles about education and teaching. Okay. I am currently finishing my master's degree. Can we give a round of applause to the teachers who are continuing their education? Congratulations. Thank you both very much. Okay, so this is a quick activity again you can use in your classroom to get to know your students a little bit more, find out what is going on in their life, what makes them a unique individual. It also creates a little bit of anticipation and curiosity in your classroom. Because once you've done it a couple times, the students are thinking, are they going to read my card next? Maybe they're thinking, ooh, what am I going to tell people about my thing that is unique about me? Don't do it all in one day. Keep the cards, and every time you have 2-3 minutes at the end of class, maybe you notice that the students are very tired and they're having difficulty focusing, just say, put your pencil down. Let's do 3 things and find out something new about our class today. What you're going to discover, things that are common about your students, as well what makes them unique and individuals in your classroom. Again, for differentiated instruction to work, you need to know about their own unique talents so that you can change and modify your instruction to match those individual needs. For differentiated instruction, one of the things that you want to be able to do is to provide different ways for students to participate in the same activity. For example, when the teachers today are presenting about literature circles or news circles, what you will see is that they are using different texts, some of them that are more challenging, some of them that are easier to access, They are allowing their students opportunities to read all of the materials, most of the materials, or some of the materials, because we all know that we have students in our classes who are very high achieving, students who are working on becoming high achieving, and students who are struggling to enter the learning experience. As you listen to the teachers' presentations today, really look for the ways that they are responding to the talents and strengths of their students and building on those. We're going to do another quick model or demonstration. For this, I need to ask 4 individuals to come to the front of the room. And hopefully they remember who they are. So if we could just give them a round of applause, say thank you very much for volunteering, and they're going to come on up to the front. Okay, we're going to get them busy working on activity while we go on to talk about the next teaching practice, which is assessment for learning. So, our volunteers, what I would like you to do is I would like you to build this model, please. I'm going to give you approximately 2 minutes. Ready, set, go. Okay, while they're building that, I'm going to introduce assessment for learning. Assessment for learning has 6 parts. When we're using assessment for learning, we again are thinking about what are our learning intentions, what are our goals. The second piece of assessment for learning, what is the criteria we're going to use to evaluate that? Pretty similar to backwards by design. Third thing, what feedback can I give to individuals along the way, so that I can help them be more successful throughout the learning experience. The fourth part, I'm going to ask them some questions to keep them thinking, just like we did in that flower model. I start with something that's low-level thinking, move to those higher-level thinking questions. I'm going to build in opportunities for self and peer assessment. Again, I want them to know how they are doing, how they are progressing. And finally, I want to create ownership. Let's see how our volunteers did. Okay, time is up. You need to stop. All right. Let's see. So this one here, if we look at what she's done here, she's got the sides. Not too bad. It kind of sort of looks like what we started with. Okay, pretty good job, pretty good. Okay, oh, got a lid. Pretty good, right? Look at that. But you know what? It's got a lot of holes. It's some very jagged edges. It's kind of a rough job. Okay, let's see here. Kind of, sort of. Yeah, getting a little bit close, but no bottom. Okay. And here, did you look at the model? Okay. This is an example where I did not use assessment for learning, because I provided them with no support, no feedback, no encouragement along the way. And now I have run out of time. I don't have time to go back and reteach this. Now I have to accept these final products and say, okay, fine, this is your performance, this is your mark, we need to move on to the next topic. When I don't use assessment for learning, what I am doing is setting my students up for failure, possibly. Because what is happening is that they are giving no feedback along the way, there is no opportunities for them to try again, and there is no opportunities for them actually to improve. All they are left with is a final mark, and they may not even understand why they got the mark that they did. Ladies, thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Give them a round of applause. And please take a treat and take a little pin from SFU. So before you go back to your seat, please take one with you. Okay, so now let's talk about what assessment for learning actually should look like. That was not assessment for learning. Let's see what it could be. If you were coaching athletes, for example, maybe you're coaching soccer or football, and you stood on the edge of the soccer field, and you were watching your athletes, and you started saying, 6, 5, 4, 2, 10, 5. What would they do? They have no idea what those numbers are actually meaning, because they don't need a mark, they don't need a grade, they need to know why it's working, why it's not working, and perhaps some ideas on how to get a little bit better. Assessment for learning is trying to extend the time period between starting an activity and getting a mark. It wants to, instead of giving a grade or mark right away, give some feedback. So look at each of the parts for assessment for learning. Learning intentions. Remember how we started today's session? Saying, okay, these are the 3 things that you're going to be doing today. Why do I do that? Because I want you to know what you need to know, what you need to be able to do, and by the end, what I'm going to ask you to do as a performance piece. The second part for assessment for learning is I want to make sure that you understand how you will be evaluated, what the criteria is. For our 4 volunteers, they had absolutely no idea how I was going to evaluate them. I just told them to get started, and they really did give it their best effort, but again, I failed them because I didn't give them some criteria to let them know how it would be assessed. So here's an example of an activity that I do with my students where I say, we're going to do some oral presentations. Now we've done this about 4 times in our class. So they've had some opportunities to start figuring out, well, how do you make a good oral presentation? So I asked my students, tell me the things that you have to do to have a good oral presentation. So they came up with a list of things that they have to do. And then I said, okay, well, what would an oral presentation look like if it was perfect? What about if it was good? What if it was all right? And what if it was not bad? And they said, if you want to describe that, it actually means you need some help. So I asked them, okay, you tell me what it looks like. And what I did is I divided them into groups and said, you tell me what's a really good oral presentation. You tell me which is a good one. You tell me which one is, it's all right, good try. And you guys tell me which one, obviously, the individuals need help. And they created the description. Very little work for me to do as a teacher. All I do is stand there in the front of the room and write it down, or I get them to write it down, and then as they are working, I post it on the board for them. On their day of their presentation, it's very easy for me to mark. What I do is I walk up to the board and I say, okay, now that this group has done their presentation, what do you think? Was it pretty good, good, perfect? And as a class, we can just talk about why it worked. And then I can say to them, do you want to try again? Now that you've done the presentation, do you think that if I gave you 2 more days to go home and practice, work on your English, do you think you could come back and do a better job? And guess what? They come back and they do a better job. So having criteria, clear criteria in your class helps. Also creating the criteria with the students so they understand it. Descriptive feedback is another part of assessment for learning. And what I do for descriptive feedback is I ask my students, stop. Stop what you're doing. Imagine if I had said to the 4 volunteers, please stop. What's working? Okay, they all know how many sides it has. What's not working? Oh, the top. The top is very difficult to create. Okay, what if I gave you scissors? What if I gave you glue? What if I gave you tape? Would that help? Oh yeah, that's much better. Now we can keep going. I ask them to stop what they're doing and think, what's working? What's not working? What's next? One of the ways I mark my students' writing is I mark it with 3 highlighters. So I would highlight something red if I was like, ooh, this is a significant error. And I would give them some suggestions on how to fix that error. I would highlight something yellow if I was like, oh, that's pretty good. You're almost using this grammatical structure correctly. And I would just give them a little bit of suggestion how they could fix it for next time. And then I highlight things that are in green. And I say, yes, good, good, this is working, this is working. So when they get their writing back, there is no mark. No mark. But there's 3 colors, and they know. And I would ask them, okay, look at the things that are green. Good job. I think we're done learning those things. Look at the things that are yellow. Okay, here are some common errors that our class is making. Let's fix some of those. Let's look at what's red. And let's think about how we can work on those red objects. Here's a quick example. Again, I don't want to give too much. Good, good. A little bit of concern here. Ooh, here's a red zone. We need to work on this. I don't want to circle too much red, because if I give them too much red, they feel overwhelmed. Just give them a little bit at a time. Again, here's a rubric that I use for writing. If you take a look at the top, there's no place for a mark. There's only place to give them a plus, a okay sign, and a minus sign. Not working. And what I do as a teacher is I look at these different parts of their writing assignment, and I will just give them a plus, a wave, or a minus sign, and then give them some comments. And sometimes what I'll do is I say, I'm just going to mark this part of your writing this time, and then get you to work on it. The other thing is, once I teach them how to do it, they can do it for each other. There is a researcher who has been working quite a bit on giving students descriptive feedback. Her name is Carol Dweck, and what she did is she worked with hundreds of secondary students, and she gave them a nonverbal IQ test. And she did 2 types of feedback. One type of feedback where she praised the students for their abilities, and one type of feedback where she praised them for their effort. What she discovered is, during her research, that when the students were asked if they would like to do a more challenging task after completing the first task, when she had praised them for their ability, you're very smart, you are really knowledgeable about this, the students did not want to do a more challenging task because they didn't want their intelligence to be called into question. They were already pretty good. They didn't want to get worse. The students who she praised for effort and said, really good job, they embraced the challenge. And they actually tried anew. When she gave them more difficult problems where they didn't experience much success, the students who were praised for ability thought that they weren't smart anymore. The students who she praised for effort, they thought that they should actually work harder and try to get better. The students who, when they were asked about their experience when they were praised for their ability, said they liked doing the easy questions, but they didn't like the hard questions. The students who had been praised for their effort said they enjoyed doing all the problems and actually found that the harder problems were more fun and interesting. At the end, when they were given a new set of problems, the students who had been praised for their ability, you're so smart, actually did worse because they had lost faith in their ability. The students who had been praised for their effort, really good job. I can see that you were working hard to understand this. They found that they actually worked hard on the problems and sharpened their skills. So when we use assessment for learning, we want to give our students descriptive feedback. We also want to ask questions that are open-ended. For example, what does a good oral presentation look like, sound like? We want to give them opportunities to assess their own work and to assess others. When you listen to the teachers' presentations today, you will see how they have used self and peer assessment. And finally, what we want to create are experiences where students feel like they own the work and they own the mark. They don't actually need you to tell them what the mark is anymore because they know if it's a good job or a not so good job. They don't actually need some external motivation to continue. Their motivation will come more from inside if they feel like they own the work and if they have a voice in how it is assessed or evaluated. We are running very close to out of time. So what I would like to do is just quickly before I close today's presentation, I'd like to give you an opportunity to again turn and talk to your partner. Do you think assessment for learning is an effective teaching practice that you could use in your classroom? Do you already use it and how is it working for you? Please turn and talk to your partner. All right. So I've been told that there's perhaps some drinks and snacks waiting for us, so that I should perhaps finish up the presentation so you can go and have a rest, since you've learned, I hope, had an opportunity to learn a lot this morning. Before we go, I'd like to just leave you with a few final thoughts. If we're talking about how teaching is changing, we're probably going to have a quick conversation about the use of technology. Would you go to a doctor who you knew was using strategies or treatment and technology from 10 years ago? Would you trust that doctor with some of your health care? Seeing a lot of head shaking. If it's not good enough for the medical profession, why is it good enough for the educational profession to use technology and to use strategies that are outdated? What we want to do as teachers is constantly be thinking, how can I keep up with the flow of change, using some of the effective strategies that we've talked about today, using those techniques that have been proven that they work. So here are the rankings that the students or the teachers in Canada put for their teaching practices. Number 1, they said, most important for teachers to be using differentiated or responsive instruction. Instruction that changes and meets the needs of their students. Number 2, they said, was backwards by design. Number 3, universal design for learning. And number 4, assessment for learning. What they found is that as a teacher, if we are working on these 4 effective teaching practices, we are probably working on all 10 of the effective teaching practices. Today, the teachers who come up to present are going to talk more about cooperative learning, inquiry-based learning, gradual release, explicit language, open-ended strategies in their classroom. Also, my full PowerPoint will be available on my website, www.effectiveteachingpractices.posters.com. It is on the final page of my slides, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. But if you would like the full PowerPoint, it will also be there to give you some more information about these effective teaching practices. If you would like some more information about any of the ones that I have mentioned today, please feel free to contact me by email or by Twitter. As we are changing our teaching practices, what we are looking at doing is changing the interactions in our classroom, changing how many interactions there are and the type of interactions. You might have found today that while I was doing this presentation, I was able to move around a lot and to overhear the things that you were talking about. I didn't have to stay at the front of the room the entire time because I had many opportunities where you were actually doing the talking. What we want to do as teachers is create more opportunities for not only our students to talk, but also for us to have those smaller interactions with 2 or 3 students at a time. Teaching is a very complex profession. It is a profession where there is so many, there's diverse thoughts and ideas and things to do. I believe that teaching is about endless progression. It is not about the teacher who you are today, and no one is asking you to go home and completely change or transform everything that you are doing. But maybe thinking about that one thing I can take with me and try to implement in my classroom. I really would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the teachers who went to SFU this summer, because change is hard. And we really pushed their thinking this summer. And we really challenged some of their ideas about teaching and learning. And when they come back to their classrooms, they implemented this in their classes, and their students were challenged to change what they think about teaching and learning. And I know it wasn't easy all the time for these teachers to be doing things that their students had not experienced before and that the other staff in their school had not been experienced before. They truly are pioneers going out and trying, and we know it's not always easy. But hopefully they're making it a little bit easier for the rest of us to follow in their footsteps, to follow the road that they are paving, and to perhaps join them on that journey. Because education changes when we as teachers work together. As individuals, we are good. As collective, we are fantastic. And the more we work together to be consistent with the things that we are doing in our classroom, the easier it will be for our students to accept those changes, as well for us to have the courage to face the times when it just doesn't work and keep trying. So I will end today by saying thank you again for being a part of this journey. Thank you for the teachers who interested you, and thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you, all of you, for your attention on a Sunday morning. Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to briefly say a few words. I think Helen has incorporated the presentations that will come today successfully. I did notice that. We're going to hear some teachers presenting, and this is kind of the summary of what they learned in the 5 weeks' time, and they're going to let us know how they implement the ideas in their classrooms. And we are here to join their journey, right? Like what Helen said. Caroline is not here. I think we have some refreshments waiting for us outside. Unless you have some quick questions to ask Helen now. Okay, if you don't want to ask in this formal context, you're free to talk to her, ask her questions during the break, because then you can have more social, interactive, personal encounters, right? Okay, so let's take, I think here it says 20 minutes break, right? Okay, we'll take a 20 minutes break.